Tanks shooting down missiles and drones, something that was unimaginable just a couple of years ago, is now a reality for the Ukrainian armed forces. The idea is to mount the latest Skynex anti-aircraft system on the tracked chassis of a Leopard. As a result, such equipment will become a new type of army air defense both at the front and in the rear.
It covers cities, important facilities, and even directly protects air defense complexes as well.
How effective can an anti-aircraft system with a radar on a tank base be? What targets is it capable of destroying, and when will this miracle technology be deployed by the Ukrainian armed forces? This is what we'll discuss today in Arsenal. The idea, conceived by Ukraine's friends from the German company Rheinmetall, is quite simple. The main battle tank of the Bundeswehr from the last century, the Leopard 1, is no longer used in the German army. But their stockpiles and reserves of components in warehouses are enormous. The reason for its decommissioning was not poor quality, but simply the rising NATO standards, primarily in terms of firepower against the enemy. However, the somewhat outdated armament of the Leopard does not diminish its excellent mobility characteristics. And to avoid scrapping the entire machine, the solution was to replace the gun with something more up-to-date.
There are many technical solutions, and they are not very complex, and they can adapt to the customer's needs and be implemented by the company in the shortest possible time.
As the new main weapon for the Leopard, the Skynex anti-aircraft artillery system was chosen.
The Skynex module, in principle, can be used in a container version simply for ground installation, as well as, it is already mounted on a wheeled chassis. Several systems have been delivered to Ukraine, and you can even find footage of such a system being used in the skies over Kyiv. It uses a wide range of munitions, and in particular for shooting at aerial targets, it uses programmed munitions. Moreover, the consumption of such munitions is minimal.
To be fair, it should be noted that this anti-aircraft tank, which designers have already dubbed Frankenstein and Shainki, is still in the production stage. However, according to experts, once the final consumer is found, the assembly process will take just a few months.
This statement from the Rheinmetall company is a kind of marketing move to work in the public space with potential customers, the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. There is no question that there is a need for such equipment, and there is no doubt that the Rheinmetall company can provide such a technical solution.
Moreover, they can provide it quickly and efficiently, as essentially nothing new needs to be invented. There is the Leopard tank, well known to several generations of German engineers, and the Skynex installation, which has been produced by the corporation for several years now. Considering the modular concept of NATO equipment, it won't take much time to combine one with the other, nor to train our military personnel. After all, both the tank and the anti-aircraft gun have already been battle-tested in Ukraine and are well known to the Ukrainian armed forces.
The same chassis from the Leopard 1 tank, it is also used on the so-called Leopard anti-aircraft tank. So there is already a certain level of unification here, because this chassis is already familiar in Ukraine. And the company Rheinmetall also helps provide repair and maintenance for these tanks.
What opportunities will Frankenstein open up for the defense forces of Ukraine? According to analysts, this will be a powerful enhancement to our air defense system. The quantity of equipment supplied will also play a significant role. However, considering the characteristics of the hybrid tank's weaponry, even a few of these can improve the situation in a specific area.
They are effective against drones, UAVs, low-flying cruise missiles, and any objects that are in subsonic flight mode and at low altitudes. This is the essence of the short-range echelon. It covers cities, important objects, and also directly even medium and long-range air defense complexes.
Moreover, the Skynex is not just a simple anti-aircraft gun like an additional weapon on armored vehicles. Skynex is a full-fledged modern, short-range air defense system.
They are armed with 35mm cannons which are highly effective. They function seamlessly in automatic mode and use so-called programmable shells. And 35mm as well for precision targeting purposes. The firing range with these advanced shells is up to 4.5 kilometers. However, to shoot down a Shahed drone effectively, 1 or 2 rounds only may be needed.
Considering the type of shells used, success is practically inevitable. In tests, Skynex managed to shoot down a swarm of 8 small drones with a single shot. With such performance, a single German system is capable of destroying several hundred aerial targets in less than 60 seconds, which allows us to confidently state no group of aircraft or swarm of drones can pass through the Skynex strike zone and survive.
These are primarily strike drones like the Shaheds and cruise missiles, well, like the X-101, X-555.
At the same time, the modern guidance system, a firing rate of about 1,000 rounds per minute, and the use of smart shells practically prevents Skynex from missing, in fact.
Constantly tracks the Shahed and the radar station, determines the meeting point of the shell with the Shahed, and accordingly the shell is programmed. Before firing, the shell is programmed for a specific range. And as the shell approaches the Shahed, it explodes, creating a dense cloud of shrapnel through which the drone passes. It doesn't matter if it's a Shahed, Lancet, or Orlan. It doesn't matter.
Skynex also has the capability for additional installation of booster modules. Considering that the Leopard chassis is tracked, for example, for using the complex in combat zones, a remote control module is integrated into the air defense system, allowing the operator to work from cover without risking being killed by return fire. There is also the possibility of simultaneously controlling multiple weapons, or, if necessary, installing additional radars.
Tracks or wheels determine, well, let's say the place of use. Of course, tracks are much better for use in field conditions. First and foremost, it's necessary to equip the troops with such systems. They are suitable, among other things, for protecting those same troops from threats, drones of various types, and of course, for combating those aerial targets present on the battlefield, including helicopters and airplanes. And
another advantage of Frankenstein's appearance in Ukraine should also be noted, considering that decommissioned Leopards are used for their production and high-precision shells for their operation. The cost of both the equipment itself and its operation will be significantly cheaper than, say, modern Western manpads.
To shoot down the same Shahed or a cruise missile, several such programmable munitions are needed, which, well, each can cost several thousand euros. Roughly speaking, up to 10,000 euros might be used to destroy one target like a Shahed or a cruise missile, which accordingly can cost significantly more.
Now the word is with our general staff. Undoubtedly, such contracts will be strictly classified, so we will learn about the appearance of the Frankensteins only after their successful operation in Ukraine. And in light of the open statement about these tanks by Rheinmetall, it's far from certain that the trains with new equipment are not already on their way. Did you like the video? Then be sure to give it a like, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new episodes of Arsenal.
Western technology is good, or even Excellent. Without it, Ukraine would certainly have hardly stood in 2022.
Yes! Yes, we shot it down, the bastard!
However, Western technology has a huge downside. There isn't enough of it. Moreover, to transfer a sufficient number of tanks, self-propelled artillery, infantry fighting vehicles, and others, political will is needed, which often falters.
Help us accelerate and efficiently speed up the delivery of weapons to Ukraine so that we can liberate the occupied areas. We need powerful offensive weapons, without which this prolonged war only drags on.
All of this can be described with one word: dependency. Therefore, in order to compete with Russia and their astonishingly large amount of cannon fodder and vast equipment, Ukraine really needs the weapons of Ukrainian production. At the very least, it allows us not to ask the West for permission on where we can strike Russian territory. Ukrainian drones are a good example of this. They fly wherever they please. The only question is the distance, and even that seems to be a flexible concept. And what about the front line itself? Ukraine actually has a lot of domestically produced weapons there as well. It's just that not much is said about it. And we will now correct this, at least, with one example, namely the T-64BM Bulat tank. The T-64BM Bulat is Ukraine's main battle tank. Let's not hide the truth, these tanks are indeed not new. As you understand, this modernization of the T-64 is not the ultimate dream. However, this is the model that we inherited the most of after the collapse of the Soviet Union. More than 2,000 units. Moreover, it was manufactured by the Kharkiv Malyshev plant. And this, in turn, meant that Ukraine possessed all the production capabilities. But here's the problem. Even at that time, it was considered outdated. The T-64 began production in the 1960s and ended in the late 1980s. But Kyiv got what it got. So the only option was to roll up the sleeves and do a major overhaul of the tank. The designers worked tirelessly and diligently, developed numerous modifications, and in the year 1999 presented these several optimal options. But the T-64BM Bulat itself was presented in 2005. Its improvements were almost identical to one of the modification options, but had their own nuances. We will not stop there. The main thing is what was achieved in the end. The Bulat was equipped with a new 125mm smoothbore gun, as well as 2 machine guns.
The main armament is the 125 meters KBA-3. That's 36 shells. And accordingly, it is also equipped with the KT-7.62 and KT-12.7. This is a more advanced weaponry that has increased the firepower of this tank. Therefore, accordingly, and we're talking about, and I emphasize once again, a deep modernization that allows us to say that this tank is already the main serial tank of the Ukrainian Defense Forces.
The developers paid special attention to protection. The tank was equipped with the highly advanced knife dynamic protection system, which in turn saves heavy equipment from armor-piercing sub-caliber shells, cumulative weapons, and highly effective impact cumulative munitions like the impact core.
Here, the principle of operation is that essentially the cumulative jet and the detonation products of the charge destroy the munition into separate fragments and alter its flight trajectory, and the charges are triggered sequentially under the influence of additional underlying charges, thereby increasing the survivability of this armored vehicle additionally.
For understanding, in 2023, 2 Russian kamikaze drones hit the Bulat, and the Ukrainian tank withstood the impact. The dynamic protection knife saved it from a hit to the turret. The second hit was to the engine compartment. However, despite this, the Bulat was able to leave the unsafe zone.
You see? It worked for us.
It worked?
In short, the active protection worked perfectly. It's a real beauty. It tore apart the great metal.
What caused that?
That's from the knife system that's mounted here on the turret. You see, it hit it and it worked as intended, deflecting the entire missile impact. Not even a scratch on the armor.
However, the innovations also played a bad joke. Undoubtedly, they increased efficiency, but at the same time added weight. As a result, the tank had low mobility. Bulat also couldn't even climb a hill with a gradient over 30 degrees. All of this disappointed the crew. But at the time, it seemed that the developers had squeezed the maximum out of the T-64. So other solutions were sought. There were other modifications of the T-64, for example, called Crab, and then the developers began working on the T-64BM. And the future likely lies with the latter.
Bulat started to break down, due to field wear of the boosted engines. Therefore, the T-64BM2 project emerged. Accordingly, it involved installing an improved engine with a power of about 1,000 horsepower. This made it possible to move away from the 5 TD engines, which had essentially become obsolete. And accordingly, the installation of the new boosted engine improved its combat characteristics, the tank's maneuverability, and the ability, let's say, for direct operation in hazardous climatic conditions, which will, let's say, called into question the usability of the previous Bulat series.
Be that as it may, it's encouraging that, in particular, the Bulats are fighting on the battlefield. Another good piece of news is that there are many of them. Forbes stated that despite Bulat being Ukraine's main battle tank, over more than 2 years of full-scale war, the tank reserves have remained unchanged. The publication also believes that the Ukrainian military-industrial complex not only managed to endure during the war, but also established capacities for upgrading the machines. Design agreements were also signed with the Czech Republic and Poland. Forbes believes this explains how Ukrainian defenders continue to receive bullets despite their losses. And let's not forget that besides Bulats, there are other modifications that might be somewhat inferior. But the very fact that Ukrainian-made tanks are fighting on the front is a very good sign. A sign that Western equipment is good, but our own is much better. And if you want to know what other equipment is in the Ukrainian arsenal, write about it in the comments. Also, like this video and be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new episodes of Arsenal.